My name is Jake. I'm 14 years old. I'm an ordinary schoolboy, just like everyone else, who loves games, gadgets, and the internet. But honestly, I'm much more absorbed in the world of technology than the people around me. It seems to me that all these games, social networks, and online meetings are more important than talking with friends in real life. I feel like I'm part of this world, where every step is tracked, where I can instantly communicate with people from all over the world, and where everything seems available and possible. My parents, of course, often say that I spend too much time on the computer, that it's time to go outside and talk to friends, but I always found excuses for that. I'm not just playing, I'm developing skills, learning programming, studying, I would say. And it's true that I really liked figuring out the codes, creating something new, watching how computer programs work. I always thought that when you're doing something useful, you have a valid excuse to spend more and more time on it. But deep down, I knew it wasn't quite right. My parents worried about me, but I perceived their concern as the usual complaints of adults who simply didn't understand what's important in our time. Technology is our future, I thought, when they begged me to take a break from the computer and spend the day with them. I remember them saying, "You won't even notice how time passes. It's important to be with us, to talk." But that seemed like empty words to me. How could I waste time talking when there was this huge world of technology waiting for me to explore? That's how I lived. I would wake up, eat, go to school, come home, and immediately sit down at the computer. My classmates started avoiding me a bit because I constantly talked about programming, developing games. I wasn't interested in talking about what was happening in their lives. I no longer participated in games outside like I used to. Friends who didn't share my passion for technology slowly disappeared from my life. But that didn't really bother me. I was alone, but I felt completely comfortable in my virtual world. One day, as usual, I was sitting at my computer. On the screen of my monitor was a new game I had just downloaded. In its world, there were huge cities, fantastic machines, and unpredictable plots. I loved how everything was designed, how I could influence the events, control them. My screen was bright and captivating, and I was fully immersed in this reality. At that moment, I didn't notice how my body's condition suddenly changed. Everything around me started to dim. At first, I felt weakness. Then there was a sharp heaviness in my chest. I tried to stand up, but my body wouldn't obey. The pain kept intensifying, and I didn't know what to do. In my head, I had fleeting thoughts that maybe it was just a bad reaction to being on the computer for too long, but I couldn't think beyond that. I couldn't think at all. I tried to call my parents, but no sound came out. It was a strange, indescribable feeling. It felt as though I understood something was wrong, that everything had changed, but I couldn't grasp what it was. The sense of helplessness grew with every passing second. Finally, I realized I lost consciousness. But at some point, despite the darkness, I suddenly felt lighter. It was as if I had disconnected from reality, and my body no longer hurt. I felt that I was no longer tied to my body. It was a strange sensation, as if I was floating in emptiness, but I knew there was something greater than just this pain. My eyes closed, and everything around me became dark. But when I opened my eyes again, I found myself in a different place. I didn't understand where I was. This wasn't any physical space I had ever seen. I was in a vast, almost formless light. I didn't see clear shapes, just a soft, gentle glow that enveloped everything around me. And in this light I felt calm, as if all the pain and suffering were left behind. There was no pain, no fear here, only a strange sense of comfort and safety. That's when I saw him. Standing before me was a man. He was dressed in simple, light robes. His eyes shone with warmth and understanding. It was Jesus. I recognized him immediately, even though I had never seen him in person. There was something more to his presence than just compassion. It was as if he understood me completely, without words. As if he could see my thoughts and feelings, and it was both astonishing and intimidating. He didn't speak to me right away, but his presence was so strong that I felt everything in my life, all my attachment to virtual worlds, all my beliefs and fears, begin to melt away. In that moment, I suddenly realized that there was something far more important than all the technology I had loved. The moment I lost consciousness, everything shifted. It felt like the ground had disappeared from beneath me, and I was no longer tied to my physical body. My mind raced, but I couldn't make sense of what was happening. The world around me seemed to disintegrate into a haze of dark fog. For a fleeting second, I felt a sense of panic. My body, my senses, everything that had once defined me, seemed to be vanishing. I tried to call out for help, but no words came. My limbs felt heavy and my chest felt as though it were being crushed. But then, as if everything slowed down, I realized I wasn't in my body anymore. I was floating. There was no floor beneath me, no ceiling above, just a vast, empty space surrounding me. It was as if I had been untethered from everything I had ever known. No longer confined to my physical senses, I could no longer feel pain or discomfort. But even more unsettling, I couldn't feel anything in the traditional sense. It was as though I was merely an observer outside of myself, yet still very much aware of the world I had left behind. I looked down, if you could call it looking, at what was once my body, lying motionless on the floor in front of my computer. I saw my parents rush in, frantic with concern. My mom was crying, her hands shaking as she dialed 911, while my dad tried to perform CPR, but it seemed so distant, so far removed. I couldn't feel my body anymore, and the connection to the life I had known was fading. It was as if the world of the living was slowly fading away from me, and I was drifting further into the unknown. I watched as they tried everything to revive me, but the space between us felt impossibly wide, like I was observing the scene from another dimension. The minutes, or maybe hours, it was hard to tell, passed by, and I continued to float above my body, witnessing the desperate attempts to bring me back. My heart no longer beat. My breath had stopped, and yet I felt strangely calm, almost detached. There was no fear, no panic. It was as if some invisible force was assuring me that everything would be okay, even though I couldn't understand why. The world below me became more and more distorted, my family's frantic gestures turning into vague, blurry figures, their voices muffled, barely audible. In that moment, it felt like I was watching a movie, not actually living through it. And then, everything went completely silent. The chaotic blur of my family and the frantic attempts to save me melted away. All the sounds of life, the beeping of the machines, the cries of my mother, my father's voice calling my name, faded into an eerie quiet. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty, but rather filled with something beyond comprehension. I was no longer tethered to the noise of the world. It was just me now, floating in that vast, quiet space, and for the first time I realized that I wasn't scared. There was no fear, no desperation, just peace. Time itself seemed to lose meaning. I wasn't sure if I had been there for moments or days, but I felt as though I was suspended in eternity. I could sense that I was drifting further away from everything that had once been my reality, yet I didn't feel lost. In fact, I felt strangely at peace. The idea of death itself, something I had always feared and avoided thinking about, didn't seem so terrifying anymore. It was as though I had stepped into another realm, one where death didn't hold the same meaning it had in the physical world. But then, a strange sensation washed over me. It was subtle at first, a small spark of energy like a flicker of light in the darkness. It grew quickly, and I could feel a warm presence surrounding me. I wasn't alone anymore. The peace I had felt turned into something deeper, something more profound. It was as if a gentle force was guiding me, and I didn't feel lost at all. In fact, for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. There was no fear of the unknown, no sense of abandonment, just a feeling of being taken care of, even in this unknown place. I turned, if you could call it turning, and saw a light ahead of me. It wasn't a blinding light, but a soft, gentle glow. It was the kind of light you might imagine a sunrise to be, warm and inviting, but not overwhelming. It beckoned me, pulling me toward it. Without thinking, I moved toward it. The space around me became more defined, the fog of confusion clearing. I could feel the warmth of the light reaching out to me, wrapping me in a sense of safety. There was no noise, no rush. Just a calm, steady pull towards something beyond the world I had known. As I moved closer to the light, the world around me seemed to shift. The cold, empty space that had felt so detached began to feel more like home. The light ahead of me grew brighter, and the warmth it radiated filled me with a sense of reassurance that I didn't know I needed. The place I was in didn't feel like a void anymore. It felt like a place of understanding. A place where all the questions I had ever asked about life and death would be answered. The uncertainty that had once gripped me was gone, replaced with a profound sense of calm. Just as I reached the light, I began to feel a presence. It was a feeling that wasn't just physical, it was a spiritual presence, something I had never experienced before. It wasn't just a sense of being watched, but of being understood. Completely and utterly understood. I knew without a doubt that I wasn't alone, and that whoever or whatever this presence was, it was meant to guide me. I felt a sense of love that was so pure and unconditional that I couldn't have imagined it in my wildest dreams. It was the kind of love that transcends everything. Something that connected me to this place in a way I had never felt in my life. And I knew then, more clearly than ever before, that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than I could understand. The first thing I felt when I came to this new place was an overwhelming sense of detachment. It was as though I could see everything clearly, but at the same time I couldn't touch anything. I wasn't bound by any physical sensations, and it was as if I was floating in a different state of existence. The world I had once known, my body, my home, and my family, was all a distant memory now. It felt as though I had transcended time and space, removed from the earthly realm I had just left. I watched myself from above, still and lifeless, and wondered why I was no longer afraid. The fear that had once haunted me about death had simply evaporated. It was replaced by something I couldn't describe, an odd, comforting calmness. My mind was flooded with thoughts, yet there was no confusion. The clarity was remarkable. I could see my parents frantically trying to revive me, but from where I was, everything seemed so slow, so distorted. Their movements were exaggerated, as if I was watching them through a foggy lens. My mom's hand shook as she dialed the emergency number, and I could hear her voice, but it was distant and muffled, as though it came from another world. My father's face was a picture of utter despair, his lips moving rapidly as he tried to breathe life back into me, but I couldn't feel the panic or fear they were experiencing. All I felt was the strange peace of being detached from it all. I realized, with startling clarity, that I was no longer part of the scene unfolding below me. I was observing, detached, like an outsider looking in. The actions of my family seemed like a blur of frantic movements and desperate attempts, but I was at peace, untouched by the chaos. I could see their love and fear, but I didn't feel it. The love they had for me, which I had always known but never truly appreciated, now felt so overwhelmingly strong. I wished I could tell them that I was okay, that I wasn't scared, but there were no words, no way to communicate. Instead, I could only watch, feeling a sense of quiet sadness, knowing they didn't yet understand that I was no longer in my body, that I was somewhere else entirely. I couldn't understand why I wasn't returning to my body. I wanted to, but there was no force pulling me back. It wasn't as if I had a choice to leave or stay, it simply felt like I had drifted somewhere far beyond the reach of the physical world. My family's voices, the sounds of my body being revived, grew more distant, as though I was slipping farther away with every passing moment. And yet, I didn't feel lost. It was as if I was floating in a sea of timelessness, detached from the ticking of the clock, from the rhythms of life that had once seemed so important. There was no need to rush, no urgency to return. As I watched them from this place, I felt the undeniable weight of their love. My mother's tears, my father's efforts to bring me back. It was all so clear now. The depth of their feelings for me was profound, and yet, I had always taken it for granted. I had never understood the true meaning of love and connection until now. Watching them fight so hard for my life, even though they didn't know I was already gone, made me realize how little I had appreciated them in my life. I had been so focused on myself, on my digital world, that I had failed to see the warmth and selflessness that had always been there. They had always been there for me, and now, from this distance, I could finally feel the magnitude of that love. But in the same moment, I also felt an odd sense of distance from them. It wasn't as though I no longer cared, it was as if I had transcended the need for physical connection. Their pain was real, but it wasn't mine to feel anymore. I was watching them, yes, but I no longer shared their sorrow. It was as if I was no longer tethered to the human emotions of fear, love, or sadness. I felt only the faintest ripple of those emotions. Enough to understand them, but not enough to be consumed by them. It was a strange form of peace, one that I didn't know existed before this moment. My mind shifted focus, and I began to notice something else. The space I was in, this place beyond life, was beginning to change. The quiet, ethereal emptiness began to fill with subtle light. It wasn't harsh or bright, but soft and welcoming, like the early rays of dawn. The light seemed to emanate from every corner of the space, infusing the air with a gentle warmth. The darkness that had once surrounded me was dissipating, replaced by a calm, inviting glow. It wasn't the physical light I had known on Earth, it was something more profound, something spiritual. It wasn't meant to blind me, but to envelop me in its serenity. I began to feel something more, a presence, as if I wasn't alone in this space anymore. I could sense another energy, not like the chaotic force of my earthly emotions, but something steady and calm. This presence wasn't threatening, but rather comforting, as though it had been there all along, waiting for me to realize its existence. It wasn't a tangible presence that I could touch or see in the way I had once seen people, but it was real. More real than anything I had ever experienced before. It wasn't speaking, yet I could feel its message, a quiet, reassuring pull, guiding me. As I focused on this presence, I noticed that the space around me seemed to hum with life, not in the way the physical world does, but in a more subtle, internal way. It was as though the very fabric of existence was alive, vibrating with energy, but in a calm and harmonious rhythm. The light that surrounded me became more intense, not blinding, but nourishing. I could feel it filling me, lifting me, giving me strength that wasn't physical but spiritual. The sensation of being cared for was so strong that it filled every part of me, and for the first time in my life, I truly felt held. Not by anyone I had ever known, but by something much larger. I realized then that this was not just a place of peace, but a place of profound understanding. This presence, this force, was showing me the depth of the love I had always sought but never truly understood. It was not love in the way humans express it, but a more profound, universal love. A love that transcended time, space, and existence itself. I understood in that moment that everything I had experienced in my life, the games, the technology, the moments I thought were important, were mere distractions. This love, this calm was what I had been searching for all along, even if I hadn't known it. And here, in this space, I had finally found it. The light around me was now fully encompassing, and I felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. I wasn't lost anymore, and I wasn't alone. The presence was still there, guiding me, but it was as if I had come home. All my fears, doubts, and questions about the world, about life and death, began to dissolve. I no longer worried about what had happened to me or what would happen next. I simply existed in a place of total acceptance, knowing that whatever came next would be exactly as it should be. The peace was not passive, it was active and living. It was as though the entire universe was working in harmony, and I was a part of it. And then I began to realize that I was being shown something greater. This space, this light, wasn't just a refuge, it was a place of revelation. I wasn't just here to feel peace, I was here to learn. The presence around me was beginning to communicate something to me, not through words, but through feelings and sensations that transcended language. It was as if I was being prepared for something I would need to understand when I returned to the world I had left behind. This wasn't an end, it was a beginning. In this new state, where time and space seemed to lose their meaning, I began to understand that I was not truly alone. There was a presence here, a presence that I could not see but could deeply feel. It was not physical in any way I had ever known, but it surrounded me, enveloping me, as though it was part of the very air itself. It wasn't a presence that intimidated me, nor was it an unfamiliar one. Instead, it was a presence that felt as though it had always been there, guiding me gently, and I could feel its unwavering support. It was not a voice that spoke to me, but a warmth that radiated from the light itself, filling every corner of this vast, empty space. I didn't need to see it. I could simply sense its depth, its purpose, and its love. The warmth that radiated from this presence began to spread through me, and as it did, I felt as though I was being gently unfolded, layer by layer. It was like the light was peeling back the layers of my life, my thoughts, and my past. The walls I had built up inside myself, the fears, doubts, and anger I had carried with me, each one began to dissolve in this light. I could feel the weight of all the things that had once burdened me lifting off my shoulders, leaving me lighter, freer, and more open. This wasn't an immediate or jarring experience. It wasn't like a sudden flood of emotions. It was more like a slow release, a deep cleansing of everything that had once held me back. As the light continued to wash over me, I began to see flashes of memories, moments from my life, but they weren't as I remembered them. It was as if these memories were being rearranged and put into a new context. I saw the faces of my family, my friends, all the people I had known, but now their faces seemed different, more vivid, more alive than I had ever seen them. I saw my parents, and their love for me became crystal clear. I had never truly understood the depth of their feelings, the sacrifices they had made, the way they had always been there for me. I felt that love enveloping me, and for the first time I realized just how deeply they had cared for me. The warmth of the presence grew stronger, and with it came a sense of profound clarity. I began to see the threads that connected all the moments in my life. I saw how everything had been a part of something much greater than I had ever realized. Every moment, every decision, every interaction, no matter how small, had led me to this point. The intricate web of connections between myself, my family, my friends, and the world around me unfolded before my eyes. It was as though I could see the very essence of life itself, a vast interconnectedness that tied everything together. This wasn't just the world I had known, it was the fabric of existence, and I was a part of it. I was part of something far greater, and the knowledge of that filled me with awe. But even as I marveled at the beauty of this interconnectedness, a sense of deep peace washed over me. I was no longer worried about what had happened or what was to come. There was no fear, no sense of urgency, no feeling of needing to figure things out. I didn't need answers to all the questions I had once had. The presence around me was enough. It was as though I had found the ultimate truth, that life, in all its complexity, was always unfolding exactly as it should. And I too was part of that unfolding. I had always been part of it, even in my moments of doubt, confusion, and fear. This was not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. As this realization took root in me, I felt my awareness expanding. The space I was in grew larger, more expansive, and I began to sense that there was more to this place than I had initially thought. What had seemed like a vast emptiness now appeared to be filled with purpose. The light around me seemed to have its own rhythm, like a heartbeat that pulsed through everything. The sense of calm and understanding grew stronger, and with it, my awareness of this place expanded. It was as if I were beginning to understand the purpose of everything I had experienced, the life I had lived, the choices I had made, the people I had met. All of it was leading me toward this deeper understanding. And then, as if by some unspoken invitation, I began to feel myself being drawn deeper into this space. The presence around me was no longer just something I could feel, but something I could understand on a much deeper level. It was as though the light and the presence were guiding me towards something. It wasn't a physical movement, but more of an inner pull, a beckoning to step forward, to understand more, to see beyond what I had already been shown. I didn't know what was waiting for me, but I felt an overwhelming sense of trust, as though I was being guided exactly where I needed to be. The deeper I went into this space, the more profound the understanding became. I could feel the presence shifting, changing, adapting to my thoughts and feelings. It wasn't like I was being led through a series of steps, but more as if the light was responding to my soul, to the very core of my being. The space around me shifted in response to my thoughts, as though everything here was in perfect harmony, resonating with who I was, where I had come from, and what I was ready to learn. It was as though the presence had been waiting for me, waiting for this moment when I was ready to truly see, to understand. As I continued to move deeper into this space, I began to sense the presence of other beings, other souls perhaps, who had also passed through this place. Their presence wasn't overwhelming or frightening, rather it was reassuring, as though they too had once been where I was now, and were simply waiting for me to catch up, to understand what they had learned. The space was no longer just mine, it felt shared, and I realized that all those who had passed through this place before me had left a part of themselves here. I felt the energy of their experiences, their insights, and their growth, and it made me feel less alone. I was part of something far bigger than just myself, part of a collective experience that transcended time and space. And then, as if the presence was showing me the final piece of the puzzle, I began to see my life as a whole, from a perspective I had never considered before. Every action I had taken, every decision I had made, no matter how insignificant it seemed at the time, had a purpose. Everything was connected, everything had meaning. There was no such thing as coincidence, no such thing as an empty moment. Even the struggles and hardships I had faced had a place in this vast, intricate tapestry. They were all part of the greater plan, and in this moment I understood that I had never been alone in my journey. The presence that had surrounded me, that had guided me, was always with me, even when I didn't know it. As this realization settled within me, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the life I had lived, for the lessons I had learned, for the people who had crossed my path and shaped me. I understood that every moment, every interaction, was a thread in the fabric of my existence, and all of it had led me here, to this place of peace and understanding. I felt a sense of connection not just to the people I had known, but to all of humanity, to every soul that had ever lived. We were all part of the same web, the same story, and this realization filled me with a profound sense of love for everything that had come before me and everything that would come after me. As I allowed myself to bask in this realization, I felt myself begin to return. The space around me, once vast and infinite, started to narrow. I could sense the presence receding, not in a way that left me feeling abandoned, but in a way that told me I was ready to move on. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was going with love, with understanding, and with peace. I had been shown what I needed to see, and now it was time to carry that knowledge forward, back into the world I had left behind. The first sensation I experienced upon returning was not one of discomfort or shock. Instead, it was a sense of clarity, as if the veil that had obscured my vision for so long had been lifted, revealing a world that was always there but one I had never truly seen. It was not the physical world as I had known it, but something deeper, more profound. The air felt different, thicker with meaning, charged with purpose. The sounds of life around me, once distant and often ignored, now filled my senses with an intense awareness. The rustling of the trees outside my window, the hum of traffic in the distance, the whisper of wind against the walls. These were all part of a larger symphony, one that I had never fully appreciated until now. It was as though the entire world was alive, connected in ways I couldn't yet fully understand. For the first time, I noticed the weight of every moment. Each second now seemed significant. Time, which I had always taken for granted, now felt like a precious commodity, not to be wasted or taken lightly. I could feel the flow of time moving through me, gently but undeniably. It was as though every moment had its own purpose, its own meaning, and I was being given the gift of truly experiencing it. The ticking of a clock on the wall, once a monotonous sound, now felt like a heartbeat, steady, consistent, vital. I could feel the past, present, and future all blending together as if I were standing at the center of it all, observing the ebb and flow of time itself. My thoughts began to shift, slowly at first, but then with increasing clarity. I realized that I had been living my life in a haze, consumed by distractions, worries, and the constant hum of modern life. I had been so caught up in the noise, technology, social media, school pressures, that I had lost sight of what truly mattered. The deeper truths of life, the ones that could not be measured by likes or achievements, had eluded me. But now, with this newfound awareness, I understood. I understood that the most important things in life were not the ones that could be quantified or tracked. They were the intangible moments, the smiles of loved ones, the feeling of a warm hug, the quiet moments of reflection when time seems to stand still. These were the things that truly mattered, and they had always been there, waiting for me to notice. It became clear to me that I had been living in a state of unconsciousness, not in the sense of being asleep, but in the sense of being unaware. Unaware of the depth of the connections I had with others, unaware of the beauty of the present moment, unaware of the power of love and kindness. I had been so focused on the future, on the next step, the next achievement, that I had failed to truly live in the now. I had been searching for meaning in places that couldn't provide it, online, in virtual worlds, in the fleeting validation of others, and all along, the meaning I sought had been right in front of me, in the simple, everyday experiences that I had overlooked. As I reflected on the life I had lived, I realized that I had not been fully present. I had been living on autopilot, moving from one task to the next, one experience to the next, without truly engaging with the world around me. I had been distracted, not by external forces, but by my own mind, consumed with thoughts of what was next, what I should do, how I could get ahead. I had been so focused on achieving and accomplishing that I had forgotten the simple joy of just being alive, just being with those I loved, just experiencing the beauty of the world around me. I had let the noise of the world drown out the quiet, subtle moments of connection and peace. But in that moment of revelation, everything began to make sense. The presence I had felt before, that deep, comforting warmth, now seemed to infuse every part of my being. I understood that it had been with me all along, guiding me, even when I hadn't been aware of it. It wasn't something distant or external, it was a part of me, a part of everyone, always present and always available. The love and understanding I had felt in that space, that vast, ethereal realm, were not confined to that place. They existed here, in the world I had returned to, in every interaction, in every breath I took. All I had to do was open my eyes, open my heart, and truly see. As the clarity deepened, I realized that the world was not separate from me, but a reflection of me. Everything I had once seen as external, other people, the environment, the events that took place around me, was part of the same whole. The connections between us were not just physical, but spiritual, energetic. We were all part of one continuous flow, one shared experience. It was as though the boundaries between myself and the world were illusions, barriers I had built in my mind. The truth was that we were all one, connected in ways that I had never understood before, and in that understanding I found peace. The more I thought about this, the more I realized the power of love and connection. Love, I understood, was not a fleeting feeling or an abstract concept. It was a force, a presence that could transcend time and space. It was what held everything together, what connected all of us. It wasn't just a human emotion, it was the very fabric of existence. And in that moment, I felt it. I felt the love of everyone I had ever known, and even those I had never met. I felt the love of the world, the love of the universe. It was in everything, the trees, the wind, the stars in the sky. It was what made everything meaningful. As I looked at my life from this new perspective, I realized how much I had taken for granted. I had always been so focused on what was ahead, on the future, on what I could achieve, that I had failed to appreciate the present moment. I had missed so many opportunities to connect with the people around me, to truly see them, to love them. And it wasn't just the people in my life, I had missed the beauty of the world itself. The simple things, the sound of rain tapping on the window, the warmth of the sun on my skin, the smell of fresh air. These were the things that made life beautiful, and I had overlooked them. I had been so focused on the big picture that I had missed the small, everyday moments that were the essence of life itself. This understanding, this deep awareness became my new lens through which I saw the world. Everything looked different. People, once just faces in the crowd, now seemed full of depth and meaning. The world itself, once just a backdrop to my own concerns, now seemed alive with energy and possibility. I could feel the interconnectedness of all things, and I understood that everything had its place. There was no need to worry, no need to rush. The world was unfolding exactly as it should, and I was a part of that unfolding. The sense of peace that had filled me in that other place, that vast ethereal realm, now filled me here, in this world. I felt at home, at peace, and deeply connected. And then, as if by instinct, I knew what I had to do. I had to return to the world, to the people I loved, and share what I had learned. I had to stop living in a haze, distracted by the noise and the distractions that had once consumed me. I had to start living fully, being present in every moment, appreciating the beauty of the world around me, and loving the people in my life with the depth and understanding that I now felt. I knew that life was a gift, one that should not be taken for granted. I couldn't go back to the way things were, and I didn't want to. The clarity I had gained had changed me forever, and I was determined to live in a way that reflected that. The more I thought about my future, the more I realized that it was not something I needed to fear. I had always been so concerned with what was next, with what I needed to do, what I had to accomplish. But now I understood that the future wasn't something to chase after, it was something to live into. The future would unfold naturally as long as I stayed present, as long as I remained connected to the world around me. There was no need to worry about the future, no need to plan every step. The only thing I needed to do was live now, in this moment, and trust that the rest would follow. In that moment of realization, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the life I had lived, for the lessons I had learned, for the people who had come into my life and shaped me into the person I was becoming. I felt gratitude for the beauty of the world, for the love that was always around me, and for the understanding that I had gained. It was a gratitude that filled every part of me, from the deepest corners of my heart to the farthest reaches of my soul. I knew that this moment was not the end, but the beginning of something new. A new way of seeing the world, a new way of living, a new way of loving. After those words, I felt the light around me growing brighter, and I began to return. I felt my physical body again. The pain had passed, but it left deep emotions within me. I found myself back at home, and everything seemed as it was before. But now I saw the world differently. I saw how my parents, brother and sister looked at me with worry, how they were concerned, and it became clear to me that every moment matters. I felt my perspective on life changing. Coming back to life wasn't just a physical return. I realized how much I had missed. My parents, brother, friends, these people I interact with matter so much more than any screen. I decided I would spend less time on the computer, paying more attention to my loved ones, communicating with them, helping them, because this is where real life truly lies. Now I understand that the world is not just made up of virtual worlds and technology. We must be careful not to become dependent on them. I want people to understand that it's not just about existing in online spaces, but about living in the real world, building relationships, feeling, and being genuine. I promise myself and everyone around me to cherish every moment, every word, every glance, because these moments are unique and irreplaceable. Technology cannot replace real communication, love, and genuine feelings. This is the message I want to share with everyone.